In early June 1987, the residents of an apartment building in downtown St. Louis succumbed to a phenomenon previously unrecorded. 2 died of unknown symptoms, others sick for days for no discernible reason, and 1 resident driven to madness and suicide. There are several theories: a poisonous gas, a deadly mold, perhaps even a biological attack. Or was there something even more sinister at play?
When an abandoned industrial building is cleared for demolition, a locked door is discovered in its basement. The door conceals an archive of strange and disturbing specimens, recordings, photos, and documentary films. Compelling evidence of monstrous creatures and preternatural events. The documentarian's whereabouts remain unknown. In his records, he identifies himself only as the Terror. These investigations reveal a frightening world of dark secrets.
Wednesday, June 2nd, 1987. As the city of St. Louis, Missouri is preparing for sleep, the residents of the apartment building, the Havenhurst, are beginning to feel an illness. An anxiety like no other. Some believe it is because their beloved Cardinals lost 4-1 to the visiting Phillies. Others assume it is merely food poisoning.
Havenhurst case. That's an odd story. We get a call one night from this woman saying that she'd been poisoned and that her husband had been poisoned. I sent over a patrol car and an ambulance.
It soon becomes evident that the couple in Unit 3 are not the only tenants suffering. Whatever it is, it's spreading fast.
I got the fire department to work with me. When we get there, and there's all these other sick people everywhere. When we started cordoning off the areas.
It is a disturbing situation. Detective Kimsey and his patrolmen checked the rest of the units.
We got everyone out of the building, and just to make sure, we combed the whole building to see if there was anybody left, anybody hiding, anybody scared, anything like that. We checked out the whole building. It wasn't until we were sweeping the 8th floor of the Havenhurst when we heard it. Gunshot.
The sound echoes throughout the building, reverberating through the oversized shaft that forces air into the stuffy apartments.
Hudson was the first one to find the body.
Kimsey is quick to assign guilt. He believes this closed-air building is perfect for a terrorist attack.
We thought perhaps that he was the perpetrator and that he put something through the shaft that made everybody sick. And I guess he figured that he'd rather just off himself right there instead of going to jail. And so he shot himself.
An autopsy reveals something strange, but the higher-ups refuse to release any information. Kimsey leans on the coroner for the truth.
All of his organs were crushed. Like jelly, like goo. All of his insides were a mess.
37-year-old Ted Brasher is innocent. Kimsey now believes he suffered the same affliction as the others, and the excruciating pain drove him to suicide.
And then the CDC, and the Army, even the gas company. They went through that place for 2 weeks, and nobody could find anything.
Although no evidence of any hazardous substance is ever discovered, those who stay in the building for too long begin to experience the same symptoms. All science fails to find an explanation, but another option remains: the supernatural. The owner of the building is a deeply devout Catholic and contacts his priest. Father Joseph Bregman is still troubled by the Havenhurst incident.
It was widely known in St. Louis what had happened. There was a thought by my parishioner, whose name I have to keep secret for confidentiality reasons, that the building might be possessed. Exorcisms are not given as a matter of right by the Catholic Church. They're only performed when there is no scientific reason for the possession. That is, a possession by an evil spirit.
With the blessing of the local archdiocese, Father Pregman enters the accursed building on June 25th, 1987.
I was armed with my crucifix, my Bible, holy water. I had incense that I burned, and I was prepared to do battle with the devil.
For over 16 hours, Father Pregman reads the rites, shouts prayers, and fights the devil.
I could feel my strength starting to ebb, but what's terrified me, my mind began to wander, began to have hallucinations. I began to lose my faith in God. And at that point, I lost consciousness.
A fellow priest goes up to check on Father Pregman and finds him convulsing on the floor, coughing, racked with the same symptoms. He is losing his holy battle. Tenants in the Havenhurst apartments have come down with a mysterious and deadly illness. Father Joseph Pregman attempts to exorcise any demons in the building, but he also falls victim to the strange disease. He is taken to St. Anthony's Hospital, where doctors and priests work their respective trades. After a few days, he makes a full recovery.
Being a scientist, I'm always looking for some sort of scientific explanation for everything.
Oliver Jansen is a well-known paranormal investigator in the St. Louis area. The police are getting desperate for answers.
We can, most of the time, debunk any sort of paranormal explanation. But in this case, clearly something was going on in this building. I knew that I wasn't going to spend the night there, and I wasn't working for anybody.
Jansen has developed highly sensitive audio recording devices that can detect and amplify the faintest sounds. He usually hopes to hear the whisperings of the dead. This time, he would capture something very different. He sets his equipment to record for 12 consecutive hours in the Havenhurst. He then brings his gear back to his home laboratory to analyze the findings.
As I'm laying there and I'm listening to the sound, and I can't hear anything. It's literally hours upon hours of just pure silence. But the longer that I laid there, the worse and worse I started to feel. I started to get headaches. My body was trembling. I felt, I started coughing as well. My chest, it just felt overcome. And I'm laying there and I just keep listening and I hear nothing, but I just kept getting worse. And finally, I just passed out.
Unlike the other victims, Jansen's symptoms get worse, not better, when he leaves the building.
And I don't know how long it was later, but when I awoke, I felt better. But I still had the headache, but I definitely felt better. And I had noticed that the recording equipment had stopped playing.
Jansen is about to have his eureka moment.
I'm not listening to the recording device anymore. And now the effects are starting to go away. What could this be? And that was it right there. That was the moment when I was like, okay, here we are. I started thinking back on the research that I had done on Dr. Vladimir Gavreau. He was a scientist back in the 1950s and 60s, and in his lab, a lot of his assistants were getting sick. He couldn't figure out what was going on, and it turned out that there was some sort of fan blade that was going, right, and it was causing everyone to get sick. And he started to realize that it was actually the tone that it was creating in the room. Okay, so the tone itself was actually interfering with the actual human body, and that's why people were getting sick. So he started to do experiments, and eventually he had discovered the actual resonance tone of the human body.
Everything in the universe is vulnerable to its own unique frequency. That principle explains the dramatic destruction of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in 1940. As the wind whipped through the open structure, a very low-frequency tone was generated. Sound waves, matching frequencies that interact and transform the sound into destructive kinetic energy. Nature's dissonant note. It's little wonder the internal organs of the Havenhurst residents were pulverized.
It's what's known as forced resonance. It's basically the same thing as when an opera singer sings and can shatter glass, or you hear a cannon boom echoing through the mountains and it causes an avalanche. Essentially what was happening in this building, it was being used as a Helmholtz resonator.
Yeah, I don't really understand the science. All I know is I got a bunch of dead bodies laying around a building. Nobody can figure out what did it. And this paranormal guy is telling me that there's some special sound that's killing everybody. So I'm willing to listen to him. All I want to know is it intentional?
After Jansen's revelation, the police examined the building's fan and ventilation system.
So I took my information to the city planner, and so we got out the blueprints and we matched them up. And it turns out that somebody had taken the sound baffling out around the fan.
Hello, I'm Pierre Durand. And what would you like me to tell you?
I decide to dig deeper into Dr. Gavreau's experiments. Durand is my guy. He was there.
Well, my name is Pierre Durand, and at the time it was in 1957, between 1957 and 1960, I was working under Dr. Gavreau, Vladimir Gavreau. Now I can tell you about the project, but at the time, of course, everything was very confidential. We were trying to create a robot, a mobile robot, that will be designed to go on warfare. A soldier. Basically, like the kind of science fiction films you see in the movies, in the theaters, where you have modern robots going after troops. So it was a very ambitious project.
However, the scientist in Gavreau's lab kept succumbing to a strange sickness.
Most of the people that were working in the lab were actually getting atrocious headaches. I mean, nausea. And what a strange thing that everybody in the lab was actually going through this.
Apparently, a fan being used in the robotics lab had one loose blade that caused it to generate a low-frequency sound. The source of their illness. It eventually proved to be far more troubling than they could ever imagine. Residents of the Havenhurst apartments have suffered the same illness as a team of French military scientists back in 1957. Dr. Vladimir Gavreau, the head of the French team, had been perplexed for months.
And then Dr. Gavreau finally realized what was the problem. This low frequency was creating all this, what I will call mental and physical damage to us.
Consider the visible spectrum. Ultraviolet is the color above visual perception, and infrared is the color below visual perception. The same holds true for sound. Ultrasound is high-frequency sound above human perception.
The documentarian's whereabouts remain unknown. In his records, he identifies himself only as the Teller. His investigations reveal a frightening world of dark secrets.
Wednesday, June 2nd, 1987. As the city of St. Louis, Missouri is preparing for sleep, the residents of the apartment building, the Havenhurst, are beginning to feel an illness. An anxiety like no other. Some attack. Or was there something even more sinister at play?
When an abandoned industrial building is cleared for demolition, a locked door is discovered in its basement. The door conceals an archive of strange and disturbing specimens, recordings, photos, and documentary films. Compelling evidence of monstrous creatures and preternatural events.
In early June 1987, the residents of an apartment building in downtown St. Louis succumbed to a phenomenon previously unrecorded. 2 died of unknown symptoms, others sick for days for no discernible reason, and 1 resident driven to madness and suicide. There are several theories: a poisonous gas, a deadly mold, perhaps even a biological. Believe it is because their beloved Cardinals lost 4-1 to the visiting Phillies. Others assume it is merely food poisoning.
Havenhurst case. That's an odd story. We get a call one night from this woman saying that she'd been poisoned and that her husband had been poisoned. I sent over a patrol car and an ambulance.
It soon becomes evident that the couple in Unit 3 are not the only tenants suffering. Whatever it is, it's spreading fast.
I got the fire department to work with me. When we get there, and there's all these other sick people everywhere. When we started cordoning off the areas.
It is a disturbing situation. Detective Kimsey and his patrolmen check the rest of the units.
We got everyone out of the building, and just to make sure, we combed the whole building to see if there was anybody left,